Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Queerly Faithful podcast. This is the Queerly Faithful pastor, Casey. I am very sorry that you haven't heard from me since November. We had the November podcast, and then I kind of disappeared for December and January. That'll happen on occasion. Jose and I, my husband and I, were on our honeymoon after not being able to have it because we got married in COVID. And life happens as a pastor. We had Advent and then getting into the new year. There just was not a lot of time. But boy, do I have an episode for you today. This beautiful episode is with my new friend, Francesco Calanca. He is an amazing human. Seriously, just one of the best. He has his PhD in Renaissance art history. He is a gay man. He has started his own business. This business started in the midst of the COVID pandemic, where he started doing research around the queer history of Florence. And he is just so smart and so thoughtful. And you really are in for a treat today, my friends. You really, really are. And so I am going to post for you the sort of bio that Francesco wrote, and you can sort of check that out for yourself. And I would encourage you to follow all of his socials. Again, he is the owner of Queer Tuscany Tours. So on the other side of the music, I hope you enjoy this episode. If you find it compelling, I would encourage you to leave a voice memo that I can add to next month's episode. I haven't really received many, and so here at the Queerly Faithful podcast, I want this to be a sort of call and response, a sort of invitation for talkback. And so if you hear things on the show that are moving or compelling to you, this episode or any episode before, or any episode to come, please know that there is a phone number that you can call and leave a voice note, and I will add it to the end of a show. I'm hoping at some point to do sort of like a Q&A where you call in and I'll answer questions. But I really don't want to risk doing that or promoting that until I feel like this conversation between us grows. And so please, again, you're invited to talk back at any point, and I would love to hear from you. So with no further ado, welcome again to the 5th episode of the Queerly Faithful podcast with Francesco Calanca. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Queerly Faithful podcast, where on every first Monday of the month, we push against the norms of Christianity and culture from a queer, progressive Christian perspective. I am Pastor Casey, the Queerly Faithful pastor, and this is a Queerly Faithful podcast. Welcome to the show. Well, welcome, Francesco. It is so good to have you on the show this morning. Everyone, this is my new friend, Francesco Calanca. I am so glad you're on the show with me today. I met Francesco, many of you know, or maybe you don't, that Jose and I, my husband and I, took what we considered our honeymoon that we didn't get to have in 2020. And so this last fall, Jose and I spent 4 days in Paris, which was pretty good. But we spent 4 days in Florence, which was amazing. I am not lying when I tell you that I have had dreams about sitting in Florentine squares, drinking wine at sunset. That changed my life forever. But a big part of that transformation was meeting my new friend, Francesco, who is a gem and has started his own business doing queer tours of Tuscany, and really just opened my eyes to a part of queer history that I knew nothing about. And the whole time that we were walking around talking, just thought, man, I wish my listeners could hear this. I wish my young people that I work with could hear this, because so often the messaging from conservative folks is that this is new, this is a fad, that queer people have not always existed. And we know that to be inaccurate. But just the depth of knowledge that Francesco has and the insight that he has was really great. You know, you heard his bio, but the thing that he probably didn't tell you is he's a Roman.
Yeah.
He sounds like he's from New Jersey, but he's a Roman.
Yeah. Originally, yes.
And And his husband is from Florence, and so they reside there. And welcome to the show,
Thank you
Francesco.
very much, Casey. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. Thank you very much for the compliments and the feedback. Yeah, it's really great to hear that. So it really puts a lot of confidence in me and in what I'm doing. And as you said before, when I started Queer Tuscany Tours, which is basically a very new project, even here. It started, well, during the pandemic, to be absolutely honest with you. Like many projects started during the pandemic because we had a lot of time on our hands. And I just felt that it was time for me to start something meaningful. Not that I hadn't been doing research up until then. I had, and because I'm a PhD in art history and literature. Um, but when I started, working as a tour guide and, becoming acquainted with all of the tourism industry in Florence, I felt that there was a big void, like, there was something missing in this huge tourism like melting pot that is Florence. And I felt that it was time for me to start something for my own people, if I may use this word, for the community. And I felt that the angle of the queer history in art history especially, was something to do and to get deep into. And that's when I started, and it's been doing well, so far, given all the response that I've been having from clients, not just clients but also university, college institutions, professors, people, researchers, lecturers, and people who have shown an interest in what I'm doing. So um, I'm really happy about that. And so, and another reason, and I wanted to say that before I forget, because I tend to digress. I talk a lot. So tell me when to stop and to ask me the next question. I wanted to say that what you said before about the whole concept of gender and queerness being modern or being considered as modern. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this, because actually it's not modern at all. It's always been there. It's just that it was criminally undocumented. And people do not realize that there's a whole history of queer people living in the past. And I go back to the Renaissance, which is the 15th century, so the 1400s. But we may go even further back in time. I mean, in Roman times and Greek times. But Florence is particularly unique in this concern because, during the Renaissance, they revived all of that ancient culture. And this was really, the birthplace of something new, the modern identity of being queer, what it meant to be queer, and what it meant to live in a city that was open to this lifestyle, if I may use this word. So it was fascinating to go back and read the sources, the documents, the written evidence that provided some kind of accounts of this community, and to read the diaries or the journals even, and the life of these important artists. And by important, I mean, Michelangelo important. Michael, as you know, because you were with me, so you know that I talk about him, and I also talk about many others. And it was really interesting for me as a researcher and an art history lover to understand that love and life, especially for those people, was so important as to create and to how can I put it, like to give shape and form to their artwork. So what we see today in museums is not just, the visual expression of a master, person who was out of his time, like in another context, but it's actually the result of troubles of life, of love. It's like part of the psychology of a person who lived in his own times or her own times and had to struggle with life's problems and challenges in a society that was extremely progressive back then, if I may say, even more than it is now. Although Florence is a very progressive city, is a very welcoming and inclusive city. Actually, I would like to say that to your listener, to the people who are listening to us or watching us, come to Florence. You'll fall in love, just like what you did. I mean, you were on your honeymoon, as you said, so it was a pretty experience of love, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was. And uh, you know, there's so much to say, like just around what you're I'm this I've taken a lot of notes, Francesco, because I have so many questions and comments based upon what you're saying. But I want to start with sort of how we that first day in the sort of misty day that day was. I said to you something like, well, Francesco, one of the things I value is queer community, and I was really excited to, go to gay bars here in Florence, but there aren't many. And I think that that's so bizarre. And your response was, I'll never forget. We don't need many of those spaces because the whole city is gay. Uh, and that was very eye-opening, right? I mean, for Americans especially, where we have like districts, and those districts were intended to keep us safe. They were, it's sort of like a, I mean, um, much like a lot of America, segregation is still real in so many ways. And so these districts or these neighborhoods in our larger urban areas are intended to keep us there, to keep us safe. You can wander outside of these areas, but there is no promise of what you might run into, and so you sort of flock to a Castro, which is San Francisco or Boys Town or wherever. Um, you go there because you are assured that there are people like you and you might be safe.
Hmm.
But when you said, well, what's the need for these bars when really you are safe here, was really eye-opening for me. And then that's when you launched. I mean, it was like you didn't even miss a beat, honey. You just launched right into, and now let me tell you why. Yes, 3 snaps for you for sure. And let me tell you why. And so again, that was so eye-opening, but I would love to, I mean, you've sort of started to talk about that, but say more about what made Florence so progressive, and why so many queer people flocked to Florence in the Renaissance.
Well, I think there's not an easy answer to this question. It's a combination, as I always say, it's a combination of different factors. It is true that we don't really have a gay district in Florence. We have some gay bars, yes, but like coffee shops or just clubs. But the whole city may be considered a gay area, and people know this. I mean, the citizens of Florence know this, and they respect this. It's always been like this. I mean, coming from Rome, as you said before, I have a Roman background. I mean, I grew up in Rome. I moved to Florence 20 years ago. That's when I fell in love with the city and with my husband. So I decided to stay. And the first thing that really impressed me about the city was how welcoming the people were. Not just in terms of like, we welcome you with open arms. It's also mentality wise, they were I would say more welcoming than my people in Rome. And I started wondering why. I mean, what is it that makes Florence and Florentines so open-minded and ready to accept, you know, different cultures, people from different places and different backgrounds, ethnical backgrounds even. So the answer to this is, first of all, Florence has always been a city of trade, merchants, business. So it's always been a city like a melting pot. So people came to Florence from everywhere around, in the area and Italy and also Europe. So they've always been used to like seeing all sorts of people, mixed bags of people coming and going. So this clearly was an asset. And about the queer community, in Florence proper, so in the downtown area, there were back in the 1400s. I found historical evidence of gay taverns. We call them now gay taverns, but they didn't back then. They were just taverns. They were places where people could just go and have drinks or relax after a long day at work, and they could just hang out with their friends, and both men and women could be there, and nobody would say anything. I mean, um the reason why there were so many places that were kind of devoted or catered to queer community, I can't really tell. I'm still working on this, but I think that the combination of different factors, like the thriving economy, the extremely progressive politics, like the government itself did not punish homosexuality in any way. And this is something that's so unique even in like the whole European social and cultural context. Florence was the first city in Europe to create special institutions that dealt with what they called back then sodomy. But dealing with sodomy didn't mean punishing sodomy. It was more like controlling sodomy and kind of creating a way to integrate, to kind of make this aspect of life coexist with other aspects of life, like in a natural environment, in something that may be considered, the ideal society for us. This didn't last for like ever. There was a golden age, when the Medici family, the rulers of Florence were around. So I'd say like 80 to 90 years in the 1400s, but still it paved the way to what came after. And this particular moment in the history of Florence influenced the following years. And this is the reason why, for example, in the 19th century, especially um, after 1850, so when Florence became the capital city of the recently unified Italian kingdom, people from all over Europe, and I mean Switzerland, France, England, and Germany, came to Florence because they felt they could live their life, openly and without being ashamed. And I'm talking about gay and lesbian people. There were a lot of lesbians, for example, that came from the States to Florence,
Wow,
and
wow.
there were writers, they were art historians or art lovers, and they rented or even purchased properties around Florence. They're all still here, and we can go there and see them because they left them to the town, to the city of Florence itself. So the community felt that there was a connection to the place, to the land itself, and the city. because of this welcoming attitude that was established in the Renaissance, thanks to an incredibly complex, network of factors that did not just include the economy and the law, but also the culture and the education. The very idea of education and learning became so important in the Renaissance that it probably um, created the basis on which this progressive attitude grew from. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but it's
You
it's
totally are. You
different
totally are.
different things. So, but the result is amazing. that's
Yeah,
yeah,
the
that's for
result is
sure.
amazing indeed. Well, some of the things that you had shared with me, for example, like when the Roman Church was pushing on the Medici family to criminalize sodomy, can you talk about what they did? Like, what was their response to that?
Well, basically, the Medici did not see eye to eye with the Catholic establishment, especially the Pope in Rome. So there are historical, um, events that clearly um, point to the I don't want to say rivalry, but more like the challenges of a state like Florence to kind of uh, be independent from the power of the Pope. Back then the Pope was like a king in his own country, and the Medici family was trying to create the Florentine state, which was not exactly as powerful or as spread out like the papal state. So there was a clash. Um, from from a the spiritual or religious point of view, clearly the Pope wanted to antagonize the Medici family, and he knew that the Medici were strong supporters of the queer community. They actually did nothing to create harsher laws. I mean, there wasn't even a law, but they were in charge, so they could have changed everything if they had wanted to, but they never did that. One reason of this is probably to make the Pope angry. So, that this is
Right.
Florence. We do whatever we want. I mean, this has always been like this, and it will always be like this because it's us. But they did not just do this; they actually protected people from persecution. There were writers, gay writers, and gay artists who had to escape because they would have been burned at the stake, and they came to Florence. So the Medici response was clearly to protect their own interests, so to protect their own independence, and to put a stop to the persecutions by sort of establishing a safe haven for these guys to express themselves freely. Think about think about the problems between Lorenzo the Magnificent, the Lorenzo de' Medici, who was the probably the Renaissance man, the patron of the arts of the Renaissance, and one of the most enlightened minds of 15th century Italy. He had a very big problem with one of the Dominican friars from the Dominican community here in Florence. His name was Girolamo Savonarola, and Savonarola was a kind of orthodox and very um, driven, motivated inquisitor. He wanted the whole queer community in Florence to be treated like what they did in Venice, exactly what they did in Venice. In Venice, people got burned at the stake. In Florence, there was no capital punishment against sodomy. So he said, I want the Venetian treatment for the Florentine gays. Lorenzo and his followers, because he had a lot of followers, his clan, they stood up against the friar's supporters and the friar himself. And there were fights on the street at that point because these people had to defend their own life and their own loves. So they kind of went down the street, and they created their own sort of army to fight the friars. Piagnoni, in Italian, it means whiners. That's the name of the friar's followers. The whiners, basically, the friar had these young kids, like teenagers, 14, 15 years old. He had them dress up as angels, and they were made to knock at people's doors and tell them to repent. Also, they were sent to the taverns and made to trash and make a mess and beat people up on the street. The situation was getting out of control. So the queer people here, they said we have to fight. So they created this interesting brotherhood. It was called the Bad Brothers Brotherhood, and they sort
The
of
Bad
the
Brothers
Bad
Brotherhood.
Brothers, the Bad Brothers Brotherhood. Yeah, Compagnacci in Italian. So the Compagnacci and the Piagnoni, the whiners and the Bad Brothers, were at some point fighting on the street and trying to to make their own voice heard. It worked. Because the friar, well, unfortunately, the friar got a little too excited. And when Lorenzo died, because Lorenzo was already very old at that point, he died in 1492. The friar's power rose for a couple of years, up to the point when he was literally invited into the government. He was invited to take part in the governmental actions and jurisdiction of the city. So he felt so empowered, he started attacking the Pope in Rome himself. I mean, the friar from Florence attacking Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope in Florence, saying that the Pope was the son of the devil, that he had sons and daughters, which was true, but Alexander didn't really like to be reminded of that. And the Savonarola basically made a huge mistake. He said that the whole of Rome should be burned, razed to the ground completely, like Sodom. So Alexander sent his papal bull to Florence. First, he sent his excommunication to the friar himself and then to the town of Florence. The whole city was outside of the Christian world for quite a long time, but the Florentines could not afford to get out of the Christian community, because otherwise they wouldn't have the permission, like the legal permission to do business with other Christian cities. So they had to take action against the friar, even though they didn't like violence at all. I mean, Florence is strongly against any form of violence, and they're all for, peace and love. But they had to do that because money is very important. Money is an object here. So
Money talks, honey. Money talks.
money talks. So they had to take the friar, and they sentenced him to death. But that's when the Bad Brothers. And I'm sorry, I sometimes I talk about this on my tours. some of my tours end on this mean note, but it's nothing. It's not that I advocate, for this. It's just that at during the execution, the friar was he was hanged by the neck first, so they killed him first before burning him. So he was already dead when they started the fire. When this fire, before the fire started, the executioner was like waiting for the government, the lords of the government, to give him the green light, basically. So he was just waiting, and the bad brothers were like standing before the body of the friar, impatiently waiting for this to happen. And legend has it, and I found this on during my research. Legend has it that one of the bad brothers was he couldn't wait any longer, so he took the fire himself and started, the bonfire. They waited until the body was turned into ashes, and they took the ashes while they were still hot and scattered them into the river. We have a river, as you know, running
Yes,
through
beautiful.
Florence, the Arno
Yeah.
River. So they went to the river and they just threw the ashes to the river because they didn't really want um, anyone to turn the memory of this friar into a sort of shrine so that people could remember and maybe carry on his legacy, this legacy of persecution and intolerance, which is what they were strongly against. It's not that the friar was a hateful person per se. It was more like the things that he did to them. That's what condemned him, because, after all, he was a victim. So what happened after this was a celebration. This happened on May the 28th, 1498, and the celebration went on for a week. So the queer community in Florence celebrated. They went down the street carrying signs and playing music and dancing on the street. So I like to think of this as the first gay pride parade in Western civilization. Uh, it started for a different reason, and but it was like,
But still in protest, right?
it
Still
was
in
a
still in
protest.
still in riot, right? Like, I
Yes,
mean, that's the powerful image for me. Like, when we think of the United States first Pride parade, right? We often attribute it to Stonewall, um, where Black trans folks and other trans people of color basically were tired of the police breaking into their bars, much like the Friars people, right? Breaking into being the moral police and beating people up, taking their money. And it was sort of like another moment of, we're not going to do this. We're not going to stand for this for one more minute.
true.
And for 3 days they rioted, and then they celebrated. I mean, this is something that happens throughout history, and I think that that's the piece for me, that as you told that story on the tour, that really resonated in me in terms of queer courage, queer survival. Obviously, we are not for killing people, right? That's not what we're saying here, but there is a sense in which, uh, you know, I think that for a lot of younger queer folks, they my concern for them is their inability to be durable or
Hmm.
resilient, because the messaging, because so much of their journey has been, look, for a lot of the young people I serve, they grew up in a world where gay marriage was legal. That was not the case for me.
Hmm.
I mean, we have had to fight tooth and nail for our existence in the world, for our ability to claim space. And so, go ahead.
No, that is absolutely true. I grew up in a world where gay marriage was not legal, and in Italy, uh, the law, what we call the civil partnership law, was passed in 2015, so not too long ago. and I had to fight. I had to take part in rallies. I had to do my part, and sometimes I think that we can't take our freedom for granted. And it is very important to go. Well, what I'm doing, for example, like my little part that I'm playing right now, because I'm so over the hill, I can't go down the street, and I leave that to the younger generations, but the Gen Z and all that. But and they should and I'm encouraging them to do that, even in Florence, here, uh, because if you take your freedom for granted, and you forget where you come from, you forget the struggles and the blood that was shed to be able, to live your life like we do right now, then you may go back to what it was before in like the blink of an eye. So people may take that liberty from you. So we need to be aware of our roots, and we need to be you know, interested and passionate about what happened to our brothers and sisters before us. And it is important to keep in mind that we are not alone. For centuries, people, and I mean people from all over the world and from different backgrounds, including university background. That's the background I come from. They've been spreading lies about the fragmentation of the queer community and the fact that there were, yeah, some isolated, cases here and then in history that didn't really matter that much. So this lie has done so much damage to us because it has made us believe that we are born in a vacuum. We're
That's
just
right.
like
That's right.
crazy cells. Like we don't really have any roots, and we're just a product, a figment of the imagination or something. It is not true. We're not alone. We've never been alone. The ghosts of our past are still with us. It's just they're screaming to be heard, and we have the responsibility to make those voices heard and to bring them back to life. Not because the past has to be revived. We don't really, we can't go back to the 1400s or the 1500s. God, no, no. I don't
Right.
want to. I mean, no bathrooms, no showers, nothing like that.
Right.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, rediscovering the roots of our community. And what we have now in Italy, and I'm so blessed, I feel blessed because I have a lot to draw from here, but you do have it too. It's just that the past is a little, it's hidden sometimes, and we are more hidden from history than other minorities, because we have something that was has always been seen as a sort of moral perversion or something. There's something wrong with these guys. No, it's not that. It is a narrative of love, bravery, courage, and survival, and
Yeah.
that's what we have to celebrate.
Bravery, courage, and survival. Yeah.
Yes.
I I love you, Francesco, first of all. I
Oh,
really
thank
do.
you so much.
Um
Likewise, the feeling is mutual.
I I believe that we are in a queer renaissance. I believe that we are in a time culturally where we are seeing the rise of queerness in a way that we haven't seen since probably the early 80s. Globally, I really do believe globally we are seeing the rise of a queer renaissance. Um, and I wonder what you think our ancient queer ancestors would be saying to us in these days. And maybe it is, and maybe it's what you already said, Don't, don't give up your freedoms, don't back down from the fight. I don't know what you would think, but I just, every it feels like everybody is coming out, I mean, and it feels like there's a sense of pride in living our difference and being true to ourselves, in a way that I feel like for a long time was has been suppressed. I see it especially in Gen Z. That's I work with Gen Z young people. Um, and I wonder what you think our queer Renaissance ancestors would tell us in this moment. What are the things that are
Hmm.
important?
Well, this is a very interesting question. If there's a lesson to be learned from this queer history in the Renaissance, it's probably what you said, a little bit of what you said, like come out, do not be afraid to celebrate your difference. Nowadays we hear a lot, even here in Italy, or Europe, we hear a lot of the acronym, the LGBT IAQ plus, and we're sometimes, I mean, sometimes people struggle with the correct interpretation of all of the gender differences, but now we're getting closer to understanding what the real meaning of this is. Celebrating your difference is a political act, and it's very important, and it defines who you are from a very deep um from a very deep point of view, you know hiding or being afraid of telling your own truth can be harmful, and you may not see the damage now, but you will see it in the long run, and it will affect a whole community. So our queer ancestors, and I'm talking, for example, about people who came out 600 years ago, like Leonardo da Vinci. He was openly gay, and he was not afraid to express his own difference. And I love to say this all the time in my tours when I go to the Uffizi Gallery with his beautiful masterpieces. Leonardo was not just gay. He said, I am all different. I mean, I've nothing that can be considered like the same. I'm a one of a kind person. First of all, I'm illegitimate. So, he was born out of wedlock. His father and his mother were not married. So he said, well, thank God I'm illegitimate, because if I if I wasn't, I would have had to follow in my father's footsteps and become a notary public. And I have really no intention of like sitting behind a desk. I want to be an artist. I want to paint. I want to see the world. So that's my first difference. And then I'm left-handed. That you remember that Leonardo wrote with his left hand. He didn't use his right hand. Um, and back then, and to some extent even now, the left hand is considered the hand of the devil. My mother, she is left-handed, and when she was at school in the 50s, her teacher tied her left
Wow.
hand behind her back and made her
Wow.
write with her right hand because she needed to correct her, So Leonardo refused to use his right hand and said, I don't care. I'm left-handed, so be it. Also, he was a vegetarian in a meat-eating world.
No
He refused to
Florentine
eat
steaks.
animals because he was an environmentalist. No Florentine steaks for him. No, no tagliata, no beefsteak, nothing like that. So yeah, no, and he loved animals. And being like that back in the 1400s in a town like Florence or Milan, where he went, it was like seen as a pariah, like an outcast, and he didn't care. He just didn't care. And last but not least, he said, I'm a homosexual and I'm quite proud of it. And I'm not going into hiding. I'm actually out there in the open. He celebrated his own homosexuality. He celebrated his loves, and wasn't afraid to do that. He was lucky because he was also, a very a clever, a bright mind, and um, he was employed by dukes and powerful people, so he was protected somehow. But he set the example, and when he died, in France, his followers, his supporters, the people who loved him in his career and during his career and his lifetime, they wrote about him and how brave he had been, in his life. So thinking of him and thinking of other um, disruptive and unrepentant Renaissance figures like Benvenuto Cellini, there is a beautiful, marvelous sculpture in bronze in Florence that you have seen sitting right on Piazza della Signoria, the most iconic square in Tuscany. That is Perseus, the demigod. I'm sure that your listeners, the people who are watching, will remember who Perseus was. There's this beautiful statue, which is one of the best in Italy. Come to Florence, you will see it. And that is the masterpiece of Benvenuto Cellini, this incredibly he was a rock star. Let's just say that he was a rock star. He didn't care about anyone. He just, just lived his life. And he used his own, his significant other, his partner, as a model for that beautiful statue. And it's sitting right there. And it's for us to see. He wrote a sonnet. He wrote a poem about that statue. And he said, uh, the beauty of my beautiful Perseus is actually the beauty of my assistant and lover, Ferdinando. That was his name. He must have been a gorgeous boy with beautiful black curly hair. He fell head over heels in love with this guy, and he immortalized him. So, and it must have been really a
Yeah.
knockout because the statue is to die for. And he said, "Whoever does not see that must be blind. Whoever does not realize how beauty can really, elevate your spirit and your soul." That's what the Renaissance people said. Love doesn't have anything to do with gender. You may fall in love with whoever, but when you meet your soulmate, when you meet the person that you feel a connection with, your souls will become one. This is a beautiful image. The two souls become one, and wings will appear. It's like an angel flying, and this angel's soul will go back to heaven where it belongs. So this is the philosophy of Neoplatonism, and Plato had been,
Right.
translated from Greek by Florentine artists and scholars. So the whole thing about becoming visible, being out there, speaking your mind was important. And if there's a legacy, if there's a lesson to be learned from all of this, history is this: do not be afraid to spread out your wings and fly. This is what we have to do: fly, fly, fly.
Fly, 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 indeed. As you talked about that image of that bronze statue, which is stunning, it also was driven out of a place of challenge, right? Because this sassy queen had made comments about another man's statue, and he, in front of God and everyone, literally, basically called him a sodomite, right?
Yes.
Which was offensive. And so he said, I will then go back and make the most beautiful statue you have ever seen, and I will use my partner, my lover, right? And the world will know. The world will understand. And so So I see that
I'm
image.
so happy that you listened to me.
Look,
That all you remember all I said. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much, Casey.
I'm telling
You
you,
just made my day.
look, this I I think that it was a powerful experience for me to hear you and to because these are the stories that people don't hear. And although I have never built a bronze statue, there have been many people in my life who have told me that the career that I wanted would never be available to me because of being a gay man. And to see the ministry that I have worked so hard to create um, feels like a bronze statue some days. It feels that way. Like you all said I couldn't do this, honey. Now watch and see what I can do. And I think that that is queer resolve. I think that speaks to the deepest parts of actually who we as queer people were created to be. We have this very deep understanding of spirit, whatever spirit means to you, that drives us to thrive. I mean, queer resilience is a real thing. Um, and
Yeah.
so I think that I just relate so much to the stories that you told. I mean, talking about Michelangelo and those what some called finished artwork pieces, and or what he called finished, but you can see clearly were not finished. But it was a response to his own journey, right? I don't want to I don't want
Yes.
your whole tour to be taken from you. I want people to come
Oh
and
no,
hear
no, no,
you.
no. I have a lot of stories, a lot of
But I mean
material.
that was
Don't
so
worry.
moving to me, right?
Yes, I did. I think it is too. I mean, look, the path is never easy, as you said. Queer resilience is a thing. I mean, Michelangelo is a case in point. He was not happy. Unlike Leonardo da Vinci, he never felt he was right. He thought that there was something wrong with himself. Like he was a tormented genius. He felt unresolved and he was haunted. Even though he was the most famous artist of his generation, he had so much money. Like he was like really he had every privilege that he could always, you could ever imagine, but still he wasn't happy because the one thing that he wanted most for himself was to be like everyone else. Probably I don't know. I mean, I'm not like we would need a Ouija board to know exactly what went on in his mind, but his works, the works that he left to us, are extremely evocative and suggestive because the unfinished works, especially that he made or not made when he was around 50. But that's, again, I mean, the dates are a little uncertain. But anyway, when he met this boy, this young man who was 22 years old in Rome, his name was Tommaso de Cavalieri. Um, he was like struck. He was smitten. This boy really left something in him. And probably that was the moment when he realized that a different life was possible up to a certain point. The problem was that this man did not reciprocate his love. So there was never, a real love relationship between them. Yes, there might have been something, but not what he wanted, a real partner,
Dear
just
sir, I
like
have a
Leonardo da Vinci.
headache. Wasn't
Dear
that
sir,
what
I have.
wasn't
Yeah,
that the
that was
letter? Dear sir, I
that's
have a
true.
headache.
That
Oh
was,
my God, this is
yeah, yeah.
every grinder comment you ever have received, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like when you fall for somebody, you think, oh my God, I found my the man I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, and that person is not remotely interested in you, and it just replies with, "Oh my God, no, sorry, not my type."
All right.
Or
I have a headache.
yeah,
Gotta
that
go.
was the letter the letter Tommaso sent Michelangelo was the equivalent of a grinder message like that. It's like, no, no, I'm not interested. Michelangelo did not give up though, because he was not really, used to being treated like that. So he kept writing to him. Today that would be called stalking, so don't
Right,
do it.
right.
But but this was in the 1500s. So but then after all, he had to give up, throw in the towel, and say no. Okay, can we be friends at least? He felt unfinished. There are wonderful but a little sad and moving and touching, sonnets that Michelangelo wrote after this event that describe his his divided soul. He felt like he was split in two halves. One part of it of himself would never be completely whole, and this is why he left many of his works unfinished, because he did not feel finished himself. So I'm not saying that there were, it was like all fun and games and everything was absolutely perfect. No, there were people like Michelangelo who did not feel comfortable, but he turned his um, problem into an asset. He did not see a problem. He probably saw an opportunity to express himself in a different way. And look what happened. I mean, look what he became uh, and what he did, not just for himself and the world he lived in and the society he lived in, but also for the future. Now, we look back at Michelangelo's art and we look for inspiration, and we find inspiration in these works. So, yes, I mean, I think that this story, this history can be seen from different points of view, but it's never easy. It's never straightforward.
It's never straight.
It is never straight. We must not, as I always say, we must not listen to the 90% of the people who tell us that that thing is impossible and you will never be able to do it and it's too complicated. We have to listen to that 1% that tell us that it is possible, and they tell you how to do it in an easy way, and they explain you how to do that. So I tend to look at that part, the 1%, rather than the 99%.
And thanks be to God for that, my friend, because you have opened the door just in your being today, just in this small moment, to so many people who need to feast on that hope, right? That we might be the one voice for any of you who are listening today, whether you're listening in your car or on a walk, or some of you might even be listening in your closet. We want to be that one voice that says, live and thrive. Live and thrive. One of the things that Francesco started with today is he said, the Renaissance was about love and life and giving shape and form to that. And in my opinion, you're only living when you can truly love those in whom you really love. And that does give shape and form to your entire existence. And so I think that is something that I am constantly left with. That's the invitation for me from the Renaissance is when you truly live life, you will find the love of your life, but you have to be willing to tell the truth, and you have to be willing to express yourself in all the ways that are truest to you, regardless of what other people think of you.
I absolutely agree, 100%.
Uh, one last story from my experience in Italy, and I'll let you sort of have the last word. I do believe what you were saying about Florence is true. Jose and I, our first day in Florence, took a trip we hired a driver, which is so fancy and totally out of our league, but we did it, and we did wine tasting all over Chianti. And our driver, this big burly straight guy, probably in his early 50s, super sweet guy, you know, and and I was concerned that maybe he would be concerned about us, that maybe, I mean, in America, that same guy would, we might have some issues. And along the way, he started to ask about Jose and I, how long we had been together and what I do for work. And many of you know, who are listeners, that when I'm on vacation, I tell people I'm a social worker, because I don't want the baggage of Pastor Casey in space that is intended for me to rest. And so when I talked about the Landing Spot, which is a support group I have for LGBT youth, and he said, well, why would they need that? Why would youth need that separate space? And I begin to talk about, young people whose parents are not accepting, the many kids that we've had to find housing for and safety for. This guy started to cry. This is a very devout Catholic man with his own children, and he, tears in his eyes, looks into the rearview mirror at me and says, "Why would any person reject their child?" And I thought, I am so home here. This man is mortified, by what other believers of his same tradition do to their children. And so, love and life is really what I experienced in Florence. And you have done a great job today, Francesco, of sharing that vibe with us today. I mean, this will only be audio, but if you could see my Italian friends' hands dancing in the air, uh, true authentic Italian. It was so cool just to be with you today. And
Oh,
um,
we Italians, we talk with our
I
hands.
love it. I love it. Final question for you, Francesco. What
Sure.
does it mean to be queerly faithful?
What it means to be queerly faithful for me, this is probably something that um, I used to struggle with when I was younger. The way I could, combine my spiritual beliefs with my sexual orientation or identity on who I was, and growing up in Italy, in a Catholic country, and in Rome, wasn't easy. I feel I'm blessed because my family was always extremely supporting, and I came out when I was 17 years old, and
Which was only like 3 years ago.
oh yeah, well, I wish. Yeah, a long time ago. But anyway, I mean, I always found around I, I found people that were that understood who I was and what I wanted and what my real needs were. And even in the spiritual field, I feel that I think that God doesn't really care. I mean, you be whoever you want to be, and expressing love, loving yourself, loving life, loving who you are, and being truthful to yourself is exactly what God wants from you. And I'm not, and I'm, and to tell you the absolute like truth and to be absolutely honest with you, I don't even know if I believe, but like if I feel like I'm a spiritual person, and I'm working to be more in contact with my spiritual side, and I think that what matters is love that you give and the actions that you do to express that love. So then again, I mean, don't be afraid to do that, because that's the true meaning of being, to me at least, spiritual, and to be queerly faithful. Loving your brothers and sisters around you. That's what I try to do every day, and spreading the knowledge and trying to understand and listen. Listen to yourself and listen to probably God. Yeah, this is what I think.
Beautiful. Uh, Today I am with you and thinking that Queerly Faithful is about just trusting yourself and trusting that inner voice. Most queer people I know who are anti-religion and anti-God, not that you are the most spiritual people I know. And because I think that they've had to be in tune with that spirit in them that says you are good and you are whole.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and so
mm,
just tune into that, friends, as you listen, as you are
mm,
listening
mm,
to us today. Take a moment, stop
mm,
where you are, and tap into that voice in you that says you are good and you are whole.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
Thank you for
Yeah.
being here, Francesco. How can we find you? Are there social medias that what are the ways that we
Mhm.
can get in touch with you? I'm sure there are going to be people who want to reach out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm on Instagram as Queer Tuscany Tours. There's a YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter, Facebook. I'm on TikTok as well for the Gen Z.
Wow, for the
Not as Queer
children.
Tuscany, not as Queer Tuscany Tours, but just like myself,
Yeah,
Francesco Calanca. You can find me. I got like 3 videos, very stupid ones. One with my dog Amanda, who turns 11 in just a couple of days. So I'm
happy
very
birthday,
very
Amanda.
happy with that, Amanda. Yeah, my love. And I have a website, queertuscanytours.com. So if you want to drop me a line or just say hi or anything, reading advice or suggestions of books, movies, anything, I will be very happy to help anyone who's interested or willing to get a little bit deeper into this whole beautiful and fascinating subject. So thank you very much for inviting me here today, Casey. It was really amazing. I loved it. Thank you.
Of course, thank you, my friend. And that will conclude our conversation for today. To add your voice to this particular conversation or to any of the episodes to come, you can comment on the show notes at thequeerlyfaithfulpastor.com. In the show notes, you will find relevant links and a complete list of all the ways to add your voice to this conversation, including the Faithful Talkback, which you can do every month by calling in and leaving a voice message at 916 534 8163. As long as your message is thoughtful and not hateful, we will add your voice to the end of every episode. And with that, on the other side of the music, we will hear from you. Thanks for joining the show. All right.